Hello, and welcome to the Sacred Heart Shaman Podcast, where we talk about spiritual healing, shamanic wisdom, and the challenges of walking the healer's path. My name is Nadia Harenkiu, and today is episode number 12. We are talking about my experience with twin flames. Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Our topic is one that is very tender and close to my heart in this moment. It's very vulnerable for me, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen as I share my story about my encounters with the twin flame energy. So, this is actually the second time I've recorded this podcast. The first time I recorded it, there was just so much excitement and ecstatic energy inside me that I could feel it when I was listening to it. And I was like, oh, I should probably wait until this energy feels more grounded and then re record the podcast. So that is what I did. So this is take two. So, first, I want to talk about the concept of twin flames. A lot of people talk about twin flames as if they are two parts of the same soul. And with all the work that I've done in the shamanic realm and with the soul, I don't believe that souls are that linear, where we're like, oh, we have a soul and half of it is split up into another body, and then we come together and there is a reunion. I think we are all part of the same on some level. We have many, many, many aspects of ourselves in our body, outside of our body, in other people, reflected back. Soul parts come and go. It's a very complicated topic, and so this idea that we are a soul split into two doesn't really land with me based on what I see in my work, which is pretty much on a regular basis. I do think that twin flame is more of a type of soulmate. It is a type of divine union experience. And I hope that at the end of my story, I will have a better idea of what this energy is, what it means, how it can look, and that I will have the opportunity to help other people who are going through the process. So, my first story is about my childhood best friend named Dan. Dan and I met when I was 12 years old, and we met in an AOL chat room. He had just moved to town and was looking for friends, and immediately he became my best friend. I felt very connected to him. I loved him very deeply, and that friendship spanned over 20 years. When we were younger, we were inseparable. We had a really tight relationship, and he always felt differently about me than I did about him. As we got older, there was always magic around us, like a lot of synchronicity, a lot of cool things happening, but it was very manic, like chasing a high almost. So the magic was there, but it wasn't the magic. It was like just out of reach, but it was a spark of it when we were young. And that changed as we got older. Um, there was a pivotal moment in our dynamic when I was about 20 years old. I was a young single mother, and he asked me to relocate to Florida and live with him. And at that time that he proposed this option, I felt really safe with him in general, but I still had so much unprocessed trauma and felt this no, I need to go down this other path. And that other path was through being a single mom, going through survival, having a traumatic experience, ultimately marrying who is now my ex-husband, entering into an abusive relationship. It was a necessary path, I think, that I needed to go down to bring me to where I am today. But that moment, that conversation between us, I still think about it. Was that the crossroads where I had the option to go down the twin flame path with Dan, or was it never really meant to be that? So that was really interesting upon reflection. Um, and the timing was never right. So he was always sleeping around. I couldn't leave my husband. The trauma bond or abusive relationship that I was in at that time was something that I felt I needed to play out. And every time Dan and I would come together and we would have this magic between us, the timing was never quite right. It was like one or both of us was never fully in. We didn't have both of our feet in. And that went on for over 20 years, where it was one foot in, one foot out. We would come together. It would be magical. The love would get deeper every single time. And that feeling inside your heart space, inside your core, that's like ecstatic love energy, continued to get stronger for me as well. And it's unclear to me if this is what he was feeling all along or not, but as it got stronger for me, the more clear it became that we were not supposed to be partners, that we actually were not compatible. The relationship started to feel like it was a catalyst relationship. I was there to help him at pivotal moments. He was there to help me. He catalyzed this thing in me, and I catalyzed this thing in him. But the energy of it is still very distinct. So about 4 years ago, I saw Dan for the last time. He hired me to come do some spiritual work with him. And in that process, he unburdened something very big. He conveyed certain things with his words, but energetically, there was something much bigger happening. And it was a pretty intense experience for me as a facilitator. And ultimately, that interaction of me staying with him for the week ended because he was not doing healthy things, and I started to be attacked by his shadow, which is a really interesting thing I've encountered in my work, where if someone has a shadow part that's so strong and so like in control that it's separate from their actual body, from their sphere, it can attack me, or it'll attempt to attack me when I'm getting too close to the healing process. And that's kind of my indicator that someone is not able to work with me, or I'm not able to help them, because that separation has occurred and they have to be aware of it in order to reintegrate it. Anyway, I'm being attacked by this shadow part and I feel really scared and really threatened. I tried to talk to him about it and he shut it down. And it became clear that, like, okay, what we came together to do in this life is over. And it was a devastating moment for me. And then about a year later, I was in ceremony with a client and I watched Dan's spirit move through the room. It said goodbye, it said thank you. There was something about the unburdening that I had helped him do that allowed him to cross over. Now, this is an interesting thing because the crossing over of a spirit is not cut and dry. This does not mean that he died. This is not something I've even been able to look into too deeply. I tried to contact him and his cell phone has changed, his email has changed, his business has closed. There's no evidence that he died, but all of the lines of communication are gone. And so anyway, I had this experience where his spirit moved through the room and said goodbye and said thank you, and I felt our cut, like our cord cut. So up until this point, I could always feel Dan. I could always feel where he was at. I could always feel my heart attached to his. There was a really intense bond that was super twin flame like. At the end of this experience, when I could no longer feel him, I promised myself that if I ever encountered that feeling again, that I would not let it pass me by. That if I ever felt that connection and that heart space opening and that ecstatic energy and that love that is beyond anything we could possibly imagine love to be, that I would not pass it up in the same way. And I think that was the most significant piece about Dan, is that he gave me a glimpse at the twin flame relationship, at the twin flame dynamic. And so this makes more sense now that we enter into my next exposure to this energy and what exactly a twin flame is, or a soulmate, or a divine union partner, however you want to label it. I think that these may all be different flavors of the same thing, and I want to caution people to try to put anything into boxes. However, what I'm going to explain to you today is very different from what I've read out there about twin flames and about soulmates. People say that they can feel their twin flame, that they, feel their emotions and they mirror things. And we're always reading one side of the story. And so that's hard to even pin down. But I've never read anything like what I'm going to share with you. So I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm not going to share this person's name for confidentiality reasons. Um, but here we go. So the first time that I was set to see this person was in the space of client practitioner. It's not somebody that I would have normally seen for a variety of reasons, but he came through a recommendation that I trust very deeply. And so I said yes. And the first session, I'm preparing for him to come, and I get a really clear message that my soon to be ex husband cannot be in the house. I've never received this message before. It's very interesting. I'm very curious about it, but my spirit team is not telling me anymore. And so I ask my ex to leave for the afternoon, and he goes and works at Starbucks. And in comes this man who is, a perfectly nice gentleman, really respectful, very intelligent, clearly doing his own personal work. And the session is great. And from that point on, we can no longer have sessions in my house because his energy and my ex-husband's energy cannot be in the same place. And that is very clear. The connection between myself and him is also very clear immediately for me. However, this is a normal thing in my job. A lot of times I will recognize other souls. I will be able to see them very deeply, and I know they can see me, and there's like an instant connection. And it's like it's awesome, it's fine, but I don't ever read into it because that's not my job. Shortly after we start working together, it becomes clear that he does all the work. He does all the homework. He does everything I recommend that he do, and he does it like fast and fully. This is my ideal client to spiritually support, and honestly, it's a rarity in my work, especially with men. As soon as we start working together, he starts to go through a spiritual awakening, which I don't find out for months later because I don't think he could really even identify that that was happening. And then we're working together for about 3 or 4 months before I go down to Peru. So I went to Peru earlier this year for a spiritual sabbatical. I was supporting a friend of mine at a plant medicine retreat and also spending a few weeks down there for myself just to do the spiritual work. When I go to a new place, I work with the mountains and the land and the spirits of the plants and the trees. And traveling is a huge experience for me. So a few months after I start working with this person, I go down to Peru for my sabbatical. And now this sabbatical is the most intense one I've ever had. I spend several weeks purging out of every part of my body, lots of crying and throwing up and diarrhea, altitude sickness, food poisoning, just like heartbreak. I'm basically pouring from the heart, but also pouring from the body. At this point in time, my ex-husband and I have been living in the same, like cohabitating, but not together. We know that there's a divorce coming. He's already dating other people. Um, so my marriage has actively unraveled, and I'm doing a lot of processing and healing from it while I'm in Peru. Now I'm coming on the tail end of my retreat experience, and I wake up one morning in Peru, and I am surrounded by the energy of this client. I feel like he is there with me. My heart is ignited all the way down to my root. My inner being is just completely on fire. And I feel like I'm being embraced by this man. I feel like he's there with me. And it's a little startling. And I don't do anything with it because I'm going technology free. I'm within this group container. So I do process with some of the other people, and I'm actively trying to digest what's happening while also trying to live in the experience. It is definitely a traditional Kundalini awakening that occurred. And the most interesting part is not the Kundalini awakening, believe it or not. It's when I get back to my computer a few days later to go send this man an email, and I find an email from him. And he's looking to book a session, wants to know when I'm coming back from Peru. And I tell him briefly in a very PG way what I've experienced. And he tells me that he has experienced something similar at exactly the same time. And I thought that was really fascinating. This is cool. This person has a lot of medicine for me. We're doing something together. Very exciting. I'm not reading too much into it because honestly, like this stuff is pretty normal in my work. Like, oh, cool, here's something new, something to learn, something to feel curious about. And so I'm just taking it as it goes, not putting any attachment or expectation on it at this point in time. So I get back from Peru. We do a bodywork session as our next one-on-one session together. And everything's totally normal. We haven't really talked too much about the Peru experience yet. I'm doing body work on him. When I get to the part of his body where he felt his awakening, I explode internally. My heart is just radiating. My groin is throbbing. I feel like I have light coming out of my head. Like I am losing my shit in the middle of this bodywork session. And so at this point in time, I had been very diffused from Peru. Like the tinglies were gone, the heart opening was gone, and I thought, okay, cool. It was just like the medicine doing its thing. Now it's gone until I have a session with this man and we do the body work, and all of a sudden everything gets ignited back inside me. And I feel our energies dancing in this part of his body. They are literally dancing like flames. And I'm very confused by this and very lit on fire. We sit down after the session because I say, we got to wrap this up. We have to talk. And I tell him that I need to sever the client practitioner relationship. This container is not the proper container for what's asking to transpire. I cannot see you professionally. Can we move to a more personal dynamic? Because there's something else that wants to take place here. And, we talk about it, and I gave him space to sit with it and process whatever came up for him. And we decide to redefine the relationship to be not the client practitioner role. And we're moving more into a personal basis. This is the moment where things start to get weird, and they only get weirder from here. So we decide to work on the, friendship level, which is cool. Everything feels good. And then I start to feel a lot of things. Whenever I'm messaging him, I feel really giddy and really silly. I can feel his inner child like through the text messages. I see his soul's parts. Like he has this mask on or this persona, but I am feeling and seeing a completely different aspect of him that's hidden. I'm like really giddy, really giggly. And when I'm around him in person, I lose my words. I can't think straight. I feel so much excitement inside me that I cannot contain it. And it makes it hard to even be in proximity. And I, talk to my friends about this, and I dub this the bee vortex because that's really what it feels like. It feels like you're stuck in a vortex where energy is just swirling and overwhelming, and it's confusing and kind of a little insane. And you're like, what is happening here? I cannot even function because I cannot stop thinking about this person. What the heck? In addition to that, every time I'm talking to him, every time I'm around him, I feel so vulnerable. I feel so naked, so self-conscious. And I imagine that I must look like a fumbling idiot, honestly. But to feel so seen and safe was such a gift. To feel like I was spending time with my best friend in all the universes. Such a gift, right? And to have my heart be so full of love for this person that I barely know was incredible. And then it starts to feel like I have taken a handful of mushrooms every time I lean into his energy. So even when we're not together in person, which only happened a handful of times, if I think about him for too long, immediately I feel like I've taken mushrooms, and I go deep into a ceremony space of processing, of purging, of clarifying, of perspectives. It's intense, guys. Then I start dreaming about his inner children and his aspects of himself that need healing. I would wake up with pain or discomfort, something that was happening in my body really strongly. I would tell him about it, and it was exactly what was happening in his body. I started having soulmate dreams where I was being taught about soulmate relationships. And there are these two women who show me about intimacy. They show me about what can happen in loving partnership and what can be co-created. And they would constantly be telling me about this person. And they'd be like, "Where's B?" And the other one would say, "He's coming. He's not here yet. I can see him down the hallway." It was crazy. It felt crazy. No, I do dream about my clients. I do dream about people before I meet them. And typically it's preparing me for something. Like, just so you know, this client is struggling with this, but they don't know they're struggling with it. So we're going to give you a heads up so you can work on it with them in person. But I've never had anyone on a personal level enter my dream space so frequently. And as we continue down this friendship path, I find out we have a lot of things in common, beliefs, values, dreams, perspectives. It's really fascinating and really unexpected because we come from two completely different worlds. Yet, every place where we both have growth that can happen is a strong suit of the other person. So, the dynamic of we have all these things that complement each other, and then we have all these things that are the same was really fascinating to me because I'm a very complicated person. I'm very deep, and it's really hard for me to find people who can match me there. And as I've started to contemplate the dating thing, I find it extra hard to consider that. Never mind friendships. I find out that he has a second house near where my parents just lived. I mean, I'm only telling you a small percentage of the synchronicities and the things that pop up. And this isn't even the weird stuff yet. So we have a challenging conversation about a month and a half, 2 months into this friendship dynamic where I say, like, hey, there's something here. I'd like to pursue it. I'm proposing a situationship. I don't know what that means, but I'm feeling like my heart is just telling me, like, let's go. There's something here. And he tells me that he doesn't have the space. And this is the moment. This is the pivotal moment where I can decide if I want to keep replaying what I have done with most men I've ever met in the past, which is chase the breadcrumbs. It's to get skinny and proposition him with sex. It's to hook him in some other way. I'm like, it's flashing before my eyes all of the toxic relationship dynamics that I have used since I was a teenager, before I got married, during the marriage. And I can see that that's not the way. The breadcrumbing, the chasing, that's not the way. And so I respectfully say, no, I'm not going to chase you. You don't have time. I get it. I honor that. And this is what I want. And so you can circle back when you're ready. And maybe it'll be too late and maybe it won't. But I'm leaving. And that was the moment that shifted everything. After I made that decision to not chase what this was, something changed inside of me. And I felt like the spirits very loudly said, "Good job." Good job. You did it. Buckle up. And then things went quiet for a couple weeks, and then they got weirder again. So I would have days where I would open my front door and I felt like his truck was going to be in my driveway or that he was going to be standing at the door. I had a weekend up in a cabin in Randall, Washington, and every time I looked out the window, I felt like I was about to see him. The proximity of his spirit was so close all the time that I was convinced I was about to run into him. Never experienced this before in my life. I start having new dreams. The dreams are telling me that he is working on himself. He's not running, he's healing. And the runner chaser dynamic is a huge thing that's discussed in the twin flame symptoms or stages. It's saying that one person of the dynamic is chasing the other one. The one that's being chased is scared of what they're feeling. They're afraid to do their own personal work, whatever. The runner or the chaser is chasing them because they don't want to look at themselves. So they're preoccupied with this potential relationship. And it's a whole dynamic thing. And if you cannot go into the running and chasing and you do your own personal work, it accelerates the coming of the two energies, whether that's internally or externally. And so I keep getting these dreams where I'm being told by the spirits that he's working on himself. He has also come into my dreams and is like, Nadia, I'm doing it. I'm working on it. I'm coming. I'm going as fast as I can. Like, this is oddly specific for me and my dreams. Then I start getting messages in my shamanic journeys that say to get ready, to believe as if he's already yours. I even had a really funny message once where they were like, do you remember that point in Peter Pan where they're like, you have to clap to believe in Tinkerbell and then Tinkerbell will come back to life? They're like, you need to have that much belief and enthusiasm in this relationship if you want it to come to you. The spirits are really funny. But the message is super clear. Get ready to be in this relationship. Get ready for him. And I start to believe it. Well, I start to believe it as much as I can. And then all my personal work starts to come to the surface. Whatever it is that needs to be cleared in order for me to move forward starts to come up. And this is where the interactions get interesting. So I have one day where I'm really struggling. I'm in the middle of a really challenging divorce, living in this big house by myself. I'm struggling as a single parent. Um, and I'm just having a hard time. And I go into the meditation space, and this was a pretty deep one. And all of a sudden his energy comes into the room and it feels like he's there with me. And he's like, Nadia, I cannot love you right now. I need you to love yourself. And I just lost it, like cathartic crying for 4 hours. And that was the ignition of a self-love journey. It was, you need to refocus this love onto Nadia in all the ways, the self-care, the food, how you spend your days, what kind of people you surround yourself with. Focus on the self-love because I cannot love you right now. And that was so wonderful. It was just amazing. The second encounter, it was like, I don't know, probably a month after that. I'm still struggling. Divorce is hard, guys. Being in a narcissistic relationship is probably one of the most torturous things I've ever seen. Um, and so the divorce is like really challenging for me. And I start to pray for like the first time in like 15 years. Anyway, I'm praying for hope because I feel really hopeless and days go by and nothing is coming from my spirit team. And I'm like, guys, like I can't do this anymore. I am at the bottom of the barrel here. And one day, I don't know, maybe a week after I start the praying, I'm in the pickup line at my kid's school where you sit in the car for like 30 minutes to pick up your child. I go into a trance state pretty much by accident. I always meditate when I'm sitting there waiting, but I rarely go into trance. And it happens. And the trance state reveals me and this man, and we're there together. And he says, oh my God, you look so different. You've changed. And I'm like, you look different too. And we embrace and we kiss and we dance. And there is this reunion energy that's really beautiful. And then this scrolling word comes across my psychic vision that says hope. And at this point, I kind of want to strangle my spirit team because I'm like, guys, don't mess with me. Like, why would you dangle this? Because it seems so absolutely unfair to tell me this is coming and have it not be coming. That'll be the last time I ask for hope. And I understand that this reunion energy, this you're different energy, is also a big twin flame indicator that when people come together after doing their personal work, that they feel different and they look different. I will say that hope is the hardest part of this whole journey. Um, we want to be hopeful. We want to see glimpses. We want to have proof that what it is that we desire is coming to us. And yet, part of having faith is having no proof. It's saying, I believe this to be true to the point that I don't need proof. And kind of holding that and holding hope at the same time has been extremely challenging for me because the way that this dynamic makes me feel is something that I would love to have forever. It is something that I have in myself, but the partnership love is very different than the self-love. So then, we're a couple months outside of chatting. We speak again, and this is the last time that we speak as live humans. This was in June, so 4 months ago. He CCs me on an email to a practitioner that I referred him to. And it's interesting because it's also the day that I see my ex-husband's girlfriend for the first time. And I see his girlfriend. I feel really at peace. I feel like I've crossed a threshold in the departure from my marriage. And then I get an email from this man. I'm like, what is happening right now? Come on. And that's the last time we have contact for 4.5 months ago. So things continue. And 2 months ago, I sent him an email. And this is what my last podcast was about. I recorded that podcast a while ago. I sent him an email that was the most vulnerable email of my entire life. And I sent it because I had a dream about him, where he was telling me that he was doing work on himself. I was seeing he was doing work on himself, but he didn't really seem interested. And I went to go say goodbye. And he kissed me in the dream, and it lit me on fire. And the fire sensation was back, and I was thrown out of the dream space. And then I rolled around in mushroom medicine energy for like 2 hours, and the spirits kept telling me, you need to work on your confidence. He's coming, but you have a very toxic view of masculinity, and you're going to pick on him for not being aggressive and not being cagey, and you're going to sabotage your relationship, telling him he needs to be more masculine. But it's not actually masculine that you want him to be. You want him to be toxic, and you need to deal with that, and you need to deal with your self-confidence around having a man who's in touch with his emotions and his feelings. This was completely unexpected. It was an incredibly intense dream experience, and it triggered, again, the reaching out with the email. So in the email, I outline all of my psychic experiences and universal signs that I have experienced since meeting him over a year ago now. I asked him if he was also feeling these things. I was feeling really confused and really like, hey, are you hearing this too, or is it just me? So I revealed myself on a couple levels. I revealed my heart. I revealed the love that I was feeling for him, which did not make sense to me. I revealed the shaman part of me who was having these wild experiences in spirit, who was seeing all these signs. You know, even like my sessions with my seer was like parroting things that I had said to him weeks earlier. And I have a lot of deep wounding around all of this, right? I was in a narcissistic relationship, which means I wasn't able to bear myself completely for 14 years. And then there is a long history of like the shaman trauma where you can't be a magical person. There is persecution. I have a lot of past lives that deal with that and a lot of early childhood experiences as well. So I'm really being vulnerable and open. I share myself with this man via email. Now it's funny because I said that he didn't need to respond to it, which is hilarious. I set myself up on this one. That I just wanted to share. There's no need to respond, but I'm here if you want to talk about it. And he didn't want to talk about it. He did not respond to the email. He did not acknowledge the email. And I was launched into the shame spiral of all shame spirals. And highly recommend that you listen to that podcast because that was a really interesting experience. And once again, such deep healing for me. I cleared out so much shame in my body and in my heart, which leaves me in a space to be even more open-hearted and more vulnerable and more like myself. And it's not like he rejected me. So there's that. That would have been, I don't know, way worse. That's actually what I was expecting. To get no response was almost worse. And that's kind of the thread of my relational and childhood abuse is lack of response. It's neglect. Anyway, another amazing healing experience that I have in this thread of healing experiences. So I send the email, I go through the shame spiral, and at this point I have nothing to lose. I am in full surrender mode, and I have decided that I am going all in with these spiritual experiences, that I'm not attaching to outcome, and I'm just going to let them unfold. And let me tell you, This is when we get really weird. This is when the crazy stuff that happens to us as shamans or psychics, nobody wants to talk about this stuff out loud. We don't want to put it in writing. We don't want to share it with normies because you will think we're crazy. And you know what? It's totally fine. I'm going to share it here anyway. So after this email, this shame spiral, stuff starts to get intense on a spiritual level. I first have a spontaneous tantra session with him in my bedroom. So it felt as if I was being touched and I was touching, and the energy was so intense. It was moving so much through my body that it felt like he was there with me in real time. Incredibly intimate, incredibly open, very ecstatic. If you've ever done Tantra work, it's a really intense experience. It's very vulnerable, and there's kind of nothing else like it. So I have this spontaneous tantric experience, and it gets really intense to the point that I have to shut it down because my body is just so responsive that I'm like, after an hour, I had to close it down because it became too much. This is something I have recently learned does happen, that people do encounter spirits for this work. Some people encounter deities doing tantric work, and it can be encountered alone or with partners. This was my first time of anything like this, so it was quite the shocker. This is also when I realized that this was a twin flame divine union situation. I had really kind of been in denial of it. I did not want to accept it. I did not want to hope for it. I had even conveyed to him, like, I don't know what this is. And literally I didn't want to see it until I was ready. So this is when I realized there's something much deeper between us. So we have the tantric experience, energy's moving, and that's when we get into a more risque realm of experiences. So I do a lot of my work in the shower when I'm doing shadow work on myself, when I'm doing parts work. There's something about the water facilitating that that's really cool and impactful for me. However, in the last few months, this person has started to show up in my shower, or different aspects of him, to do healing work with me. This is a new concept for me. It's really weird, but I kind of like it. So the first time that this happens, we do parts work, and it's a pretty light thing. The next time it happens, it's literally him sitting across from me and my spirit team saying, like, okay, let's say that you're across from this person that you ultimately want to be in partnership with. How are you feeling in your body right now? Do you feel confident? Do you feel comfortable? Are you sucking in your stomach? Are you closing your legs? Are you closing up? Please open. And please get comfortable in your skin. Please get comfortable in your confidence and allow yourself to be witnessed exactly as you are instead of hiding. And this happened every day for probably like a week, where I was just being coached on how to be vulnerable and how to allow myself to be seen by this person that I was feeling very drawn to, attracted to. Like, if you were actually in this relationship, you wouldn't even be able to take a shower with him. You wouldn't be able to get naked around him because you'd be so self-conscious. How could you possibly be attracting this into your life? You're not open to it. You're not available to receive it. And so I have a lot of shame stuff, from my childhood, but also with my ex-husband about my body. So this was a kind of a hard thing for me to lean into, but once I did, it started happening very quickly. And I started to be able to embody that energy of allowing myself to be seen in this space, allowing myself to be comfortable with the idea of him being there with me. And then one day I graduated from that, and I came in the shower and they were like, "No, you're good. Like, good job. Now we're going to go to the next level." And that's that's when things got sexual. And it was a lot of like experiencing being ravaged, both like physically, orally, like in all the ways, allowing yourself to receive and be seen in that space, being open enough to receive it and to like take in the pleasure, take in the connection, and not hide yourself. Guys, it was so intense and so hard to be in that space. And so we were really working on deeper levels of confidence and receiving, and this pervasive message of like, get ready, this relationship is coming. And that went on for probably about a week as well. That was one of the weirder things I've ever experienced. That whole like sexual encounter, literally with the energy of a person who exists in real life, but I don't talk to. Like, what is that about? The next interaction that we had was not in the shower, thankfully. I'm going to call it the pedestal interaction. So, up until this point, I am thinking of this person as being better than me. He's very attractive. He's successful, intelligent. He like knows what he wants in his life. He's doing the things to make himself successful, to do like to live the life he wants to live. And I've been impressed with that since I met him, with his house, with the way he carries himself, with his work and his business and all of that. And I really felt like he was too good for me. Now, I tend to do this a lot, especially when it comes to looks, because I am a plus size person. I don't have a lot of shame around being plus size, but I do have a lot of like, I'm not good enough because I'm not skinny. And that goes back to childhood stuff. It's a ongoing process to work through it, but this is what's playing out for me. And in this pedestal interaction, the pedestal has been knocked out. Um, Now he looks different. He looks goofy and multifaceted and silly, and he's emotional and fluid. And that sexy profession that he had, that persona is completely stripped. And I can see him in his fullness, and I now feel like we're on the same page. And that was really fascinating. Now, I think we all do this with the chasing people who are too good for us or having this belief. And it's really a sneaky self worth thing that holds us back from actually having the relationships that we want. So I don't think it's super uncommon, but it was really interesting to have it put in my face so clearly. I do think in general, people are often intimidated by me with my emotional intelligence and my like abilities. I don't know what it would be like to date me, but I wouldn't want to. Like, you cannot hide anything from me. And I feel like it would take a special kind of person to be my partner. And that's been interesting to consider through this process as well. That I've been living this life looking for partnership and settling for way less than what I need and deserve, when literally I am so unique as a shaman that my partner is going to be equally unique. And the only way to find them is going to be myself fully and have them magnetized to me instead of chasing somebody who's incapable of meeting me where I'm at. Anyway, in this pedestal experience, I'm also having this distinct feeling that we are moving through the same things at the same time. That every layer I'm going with the self love and the confidence and the pedestal and the masculine feminine, that he's also going through it. Now, I can't verify this because, again, we're not talking at the moment. Um, but my suspicions are rarely wrong when it comes to this stuff. So I'm getting this deep sense of everything that I'm working on, he's also working on, and we're working on it together in spirit, but also in person. So the last time that I'm going to talk about that we had an encounter was the morning after the pedestal experience. Now, I have this new ability where if somebody comes knocking on my psychic door, their name will scroll across my third eye vision as if they are calling me on a cell phone. And that morning, his name keeps popping up in my vision, and I can tell that he's knocking on the door. He needs to talk. It says, "Can we talk?" Um, and so I go into a session again in the shower because that's what I do. And it's no longer the man that I know. He looks different, but it's still him. I can feel it. And he's holding a meat suit at arm's length. He is asking me for help. He says he can see his mask, he can see his persona, but he doesn't know how to let go or release it. And I talked to him about death and release. And honestly, death is the hardest part of shamanic work. It's the hardest part of personal development, is like the letting go and moving on and letting something completely die. So we have this whole conversation around it. It's a pretty typical conversation I have with my clients, but I've never had it in the psychic field with a person who like exists in real time but is not with me in the physical. And then he wraps up that session by saying that he's coming as fast as he can. Okay, that was weird. That was the big encounter that happened last that I want to talk about today. It's now been a few weeks and more has happened, but I'm not going to go into it. The other thing I'm going to share is my past life regression session. So about 2 weeks ago, I had my first session doing Dolores Cannon's past life regression, like higher self conversations. Honestly, it was one of the most profound experiences of my life. I really enjoyed it. I'm considering getting certified, like just to play with it. But the past life that we went into was my original human story. It was my origin story, if you will. And in this past, I'm not going to go into detail because I think it feels pretty private to me at this point. I was longing for the other world, and I spent my days like with the plants, the animals, and the land. I was not accepted as who I was. I was basically a shaman, but I was like one of the original ones in this dimension, incarnated here on Earth. I was much more involved with the creation of Earth and other types of conversations like that. But in terms of being on the human plane with other humans, this was like my origin story. And I was not doing well. I was very lonely, and I had never met anybody like me. And one day I was standing by the river, talking to the river because that's what I do. And I look across the way, and there's a man there, and he's like me. And as soon as I see him, I know that we are going to be together. I'm excited to find someone like me who can meet me where I'm at, who can see me fully when nobody else can. And it was this man that I'm telling you about today. I felt the same thing in my body and in my heart in this regression session that I do when I'm with him. I got the distinct impression that it means I have found my way back home and my life purpose as a shaman, which is to help other people with shamanism, to help them have one foot here in this world and one foot in the other world. That's my job. That there are many other people here who have forgotten who they are and they've forgotten how to connect, and I am supposed to show them how. And also got the impression, actually got the confirmation that in this lifetime we get to come back together. And so I was shown the depth of this union, this love that I'm feeling for this human man going back centuries. Um, and that this was our full circle lifetime. Should he choose to also make it his full circle lifetime and follow the path that he's on? He's not actively on a spiritual path, like consciously on a spiritual path when we spoke, but I know that the calling is there, and for him to answer is up to him. So in this regression, I'm feeling this childlike love, the energy of giddiness, like my best friend is here, my heart lighting up. And this is exactly what I feel in person today, the last that I was with him. And then Spirit gives me this message that it will take a few years, but not as many as I thought. And in my mind, 5 years is what I thought it was going to take to circle back around. So less is a welcomed message. And that regression session was everything. Like it was the ultimate confirmation. So there is more that's transpired since then. And when I drafted this podcast originally, the first time I recorded it. However, in this moment, I feel at peace with where things are. I do trust that if this person is my partner person, he will do the work and he will make it back to me. And if he can't, then he is not for me and my big magical self. I've always had this feeling that big partnership was coming into my life, and I've longed for that deep partnership love. I've longed for it for a very long time, and it's like I knew that it was off in the distance, but I never knew when I was going to have it. And I hate that when I share this with people, they're like, "Oh, you just need to love yourself. It's the inner divine masculine." I am talking about a separate experience here. Yes, you do need to love yourself, and yes, you do have the inner masculine and feminine, and it's okay to want partnership. It's okay to want divine soul level partnership, to have someone to share experiences with, to have deep love, to have primal sex, to support each other in ways that like only a partner can support you. so that you can go deep into yourself and into your work, and so that you can create things for the world that we need collectively, because it takes that fertile kind of energy that happens when two magical people come together in partnership. And I will not apologize or try to hide my excitement around this topic, because it's real and it's awesome. And we should all have hope. If we want hope, we should all have partnership if we want partnership. And we should not be settling for scraps on the human level when there is something better out there. So this relationship with this person may never come to fruition. And that's part of the twin flame journey as I understand it. I think sometimes we're propelled forward by this hope and dream, and then we get to where we're going, and it kind of gets taken from us because it's simply like a carrot on a string. But that's not to be cruel. It's because that there's something better or greater here at play. There's a different story playing out. Maybe there is a different partner, one that I couldn't even imagine, because I'm only living within the constructs of what I know, right? But I also can't discount the potential. And so it almost leaves me in a state of uncertainty and limbo, which is medicine in itself. That is slowly breaking down my walls. It's opening my heart to the potential of love and loss. It's teaching me to hold hope. It's teaching me to lean in and to trust the spirits and to trust my experiences. Honestly, the whole journey has been one amazing medicine experience. And I'm at a place where I trust that I'm going to have a partner drop in. The timing is going to be amazing. He is going to be amazing. Would I like it to be this guy? Yeah, sure. Of course I would like it to be this guy. And I'm also not attached to it because the universe knows what's best for me. It loves me. It supports me. It's going to give me a partner who can properly meet and support me in life and love me, and vice versa. And I trust that truly and deeply. So thank you for listening to my very complicated and open-ended twin flame soulmate divine union journey. I cannot wait to update you guys when things start to happen in real life again, whatever that means and looks like. So today we will include part one. We will conclude part one of my twin flame experience. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to know more about me and my work, you can find me at www.sacredheartshaman.com.